From this desk, 7.5 years ago, President Bush announced the beginning of military operations in Iraq. Much has changed since that night.
For Afghanistan includes sending an additional 30,000 U.S. troops.
Much has changed since Bush announced the beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom. This is an anti-war protest in Hollywood in 2003. It was big. It was noisy. Even Martin Sheen was there.
Lord, make us instruments of your peace.
This gathering in Santa Monica is more typical of the present-day anti-war movement. Or there's the occasional cluster of street corner protesters. These ones are so committed, they're protesting in the rare Los Angeles rain. Ian Thompson is a member of the Answer Coalition, one of the left-leaning anti-war groups still actively protesting the wars.
It was very big in the lead up to the Iraq War. It was the biggest in world history. In fact, the New York Times said the anti-war movement was the other superpower counter to the U.S. Imperialist might. And so I'd say now it's definitely smaller, but a lot of people's minds have changed. With 60% of the people being against the Afghanistan war, it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's a call to action to say that you don't have to just sit there and take it. You can do something, and that's part of what we're trying to do.
What anti-war protests during the Obama administration? I have heard of none.
Thaddeus Russell is a historian and author of A Renegade History of the United States.
The anti-war movement since Obama took office has largely disappeared.
Attendance at anti-war rallies has declined steadily since 2003 and precipitously in 2008.
I see not a lot of difference between Obama's foreign policy and George Bush's.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war.
Candidate Obama repeatedly promised to end the war in Iraq.
I have been very specific in saying that we will not have permanent bases there. I will end the war as we understand it in combat missions.
Although he has ended what he calls combat operations, close to 50,000 troops remain on bases in Iraq. Obama has increased troop levels in Afghanistan by more than 30,000, and for the most part continued George W. Bush's policies in the Middle East. Yet 78% of Democrats approved of Obama's foreign policy in 2010. Back in 2003, only 22% approved of Bush's very similar foreign policy.
The left merged its identity with a man who was about to assume the mantle of the American empire. That's who became the left. And they became him, and now it becomes very difficult to challenge him because of that.
Since Obama's inauguration, the proportion of unaffiliated voters at anti-war rallies has been on the rise. Meanwhile, the proportion of Democrats has dropped.
It's sad to say, but in the Obama era, it is now looking like a lot of what we thought was a powerful and rigorous anti-war movement really turned out to be more the ongoing powerful and rigorous anti-Republican Party, anti-George Bush movement.
Brian Doherty is a senior editor at Reason magazine and author of Radicals for Capitalism.
It is depressing to me how few of President Obama's fervent fans see this disconnect. You will still see them driving around with their Obama, with the O as a peace sign, bumper stickers.
It's not just his American fans who fail to see the disconnect. Obama was handed the Nobel Peace Prize just 9 days after announcing he'd be sending 30,000 more troops to Afghanistan.
When he won the Nobel War Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, he made actually a declaration of war against the world.
I understand why war is not popular, but I also know this: the belief that peace is desirable is rarely enough to achieve it. I believe that force can be justified on humanitarian grounds.
Any nation that threatens its civilians in ways that we deem to be not humanitarian, we have the right to intervene militarily.
All responsible nations must embrace the role that militaries with a clear mandate can play to keep the peace.
Some protesters, like the Libertarians who organized this rally in Santa Monica, have kept policy ahead of personality.
An armed, neutral national defense instead of, foreign adventurism.
The United States has had a habit of intervening in other countries when there's no need for it to do so.
Libertarians can feel a certain point of pride in being not bipartisan but extra partisan. They are not concerned with the team flag of whoever's running the government. They're concerned with the policies of government. And libertarians, for that reason, have been consistently, since the modern libertarian movement began, a loud force against war.
And some on the left have been consistent too.
There's no significant difference, really, I think, between the foreign policy of the Bush administration and the Obama administration. They're very similar. They have, not met any of the goals, like shutting Guantanamo Bay, which was an Obama promise.
People should be out regardless of who's in the White House.
But these protesters aren't exactly moderate Democrats.
And look to places like Venezuela, places in Latin America that are breaking away from U.S. imperialism, and of course places like Cuba too.
It strikes me as unfortunate when people who are ostensibly trying to create a mass anti-war movement mix up their anti-war feelings with their other political beliefs, whether it be leftists and healthcare and education reform, or even the Ron Paul team, who are great on foreign policy issues, but of course also have a set of larger libertarian issues, monetary policy issues, Federal Reserve issues.
The Central Banking Act, the Federal Reserve Act, was passed at the end of 1930.
If the anti-war movement doesn't focus its message, the bipartisan warfare state will likely continue.
The people who populate the anti-war movement today are kind of on the fringes of American politics. And so on the left you have hardcore socialists, and on the right you have libertarians. There's almost no one in the center who is really putting any energy into stopping these wars.
The thing about wars and politics is wars generally, they're started bipartisanly, they're supported bipartisanly, they're continued bipartisanly. The Republican war of today is going to be the Democratic war of tomorrow, and the way things are going in Iraq and Afghanistan, we'll probably live to see that Democratic war become a Republican war again.